I'm Anna Suhoy. Um, on behalf of UCLA Department of Art and the Hammer Museum, I'm happy to introduce Danielle Dean. Danielle is an interdisciplinary artist whose work explores the geopolitical and material processes that colonize the mind and body. Drawing from the aesthetics and history of advertising and from her multinational background, she was born to a Nigerian father and an English mother in Alabama and was brought up in a suburb of London. Her work explores the ideological function of technology, architecture, marketing, and media as tools of subjection, oppression, and resistance. Danielle received her MFA from CalArts and also attended the Whitney program and Skowhegan. In 2022, she had a solo show called Amazon at the Tate Britain, and in 2021, she presented a new commission for Performa, New York. In 2022, she was included in the Whitney Biennial and was made in LA in 2014, here at the Hammer. She's represented by Commonwealth and Council in Los Angeles and by Canal 47 in New York. Amazon will be presented at the Austin Contemporary in September, and Danielle will present a new body of work at Mercer Union in Toronto in 2024, which will tour to Spike Island in Bristol, UK. And here is Danielle.
Hello, thank you so much for an amazing introduction, Anna, and for me to come from the back like a performer. Okay, so thank you for having me today, and I'm just going to dive into the talk. So I'm driven by my interest in how the subject is constructed in relation to capitalism, how our behavior, language, and relationships, and even our personality are interpolated by things like advertising. Race, age, gender are not essential, not primarily biological, but markers that have been historically determined and embedded in language, and have been defined and articulated in relation to consumer products. Ideology is another way to put it. Material relations, media, for example, generate ideas, beliefs, and values that form representations, creating dominant ideologies or a central common sense view of the world. Capitalist ideology is also about colonialism, not only because of the material network or raw materials from the colonies, goods, advertising, which circulates globally, but also because of how it operates within a power structure, whereby advertisements are normally centered on white ideals. Racist ideologies in media affect how we perceive and how we perceive ourselves, generating schizophrenic perceptions, and as Frantz Fanon famously described it. These representations circulate in the form of media and commodities around the globe. And so this, for example, is a cigarette commercial from an archive of cigarette commercials that I was looking at for a work that I will talk about. But before that, I'll talk about this piece. I look through archives to see how history has influenced or had an effect on our racialized capitalist present. So a really early work that I made back in 2011 and was actually made whilst I was a student at CalArts was one of the first works that I used performance to reenact and reinterpret the archives of advertising. The piece uses advertising copy from magazines such as Ebony, Essence, Vanity Fair, and Vogue, which all have particular target audiences based on race. And the archive started about 1946 and extended to the present. No Lie, which is spelled Lye, was a slogan from a hair relaxing advert, and it references the type of bleach that is used in these products, like a hair relaxing cream or skin lightening cream. And the idea is that they say that it doesn't have those things anymore and also doesn't, create a lie. So I used that as the title for this work. The script assembled this copy together with political speech about immigration. 5 women, including myself, performed the script in the bathroom. And so, for example, this image includes Mireille Lousseau, who is an amazing artist based in LA and whom I have worked with on a number of projects. We followed a Brechtian method where we created an intentional gap between the words that were said and a soap opera-inspired drama performance. And a side note, that I use soap opera, I'm interested in soap opera a lot in multiple different works that I make, and I basically grew up watching soap operas, and one of the ones that I love the most is EastEnders, which I still watch when I go back to England. I'm not sure if anyone has ever seen it, but it's probably the best soap opera ever. I love the drama between characters and the glances that they give each other and the things that are said through the ways in which the performance works. Serialized soap operas actually begun as a form of advertising. They were created by soap companies in the early 20th century to market cleaning products to a feminine audience. They were a lot about teaching people how to become consumers and how to integrate products into their emotional lives. The narrative implies that the women are engaged in making a bomb and persuading each other to work collectively, drawing on the connections between the beauty industry and the immigration policy discourses. The piece subverts these rhetorics into a suggestion of revolution, and the script slides between disgust, affection, as they work together to make a bomb.
Zoe, snap, 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 back, snap, 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 back.
We are facing the dangers of the future.
Please do not sit on the fence.
So this next piece I'm just going to mention briefly is titled Pleasure to Burn, and it's a work that I'm actually been thinking a bit about lately. It was made using advertising slogans aimed at women. Some were actually cigarette slogans like the one that I showed previously. I was thinking about the culture of women competing for the crumbs of opportunities out there and how we can be so horrible to each other rather than uplifting and supporting each other. This was and is still personal for me and comes from me trying to understand passive-aggressive comments, a particular kind of glance, bad advice, or white female curators gaslighting you. I want to blame the system of capitalism, which celebrates individualism and competitiveness instead of anything essential.
Progress is everyone's business. Vanessa, wipe that smile on your face.
Good things come to those who work. Good things come to those who work.
So I'm going to jump ahead a few projects because those works I just showed were early pieces. I'm going to jump ahead to 2014 to a work called Trainers that was made actually for the Made in LA here at the Hammer in 2014. The piece uses an archive of Nike commercials from 1988 to 2014 combined with an archive of speeches about civil rights. And a side note, maybe you already know, but trainers is the British word for sneakers. In the video, women are training within the confines of an abstract and oppressive set. But what they're training for isn't exactly clear. The script is ambiguous about the specific goals of training, suggesting that they're training to become revolutionaries or neoliberal consumers or both. I thought about solidarity and revolution, the themes of No Lie, but also capitalist co-option and appropriation of radical revolutionary discourses through both commercial culture and the politics of liberalism. I developed the piece with the number of women who you can see in this work through a series of workshops that actually happened during the shoot. So essentially there was like copy from the Nike ads and camera angles and things stuck all over the walls. And we were like drawing from this research as the piece was being shot. And the one of the participants is my sister Astris, who's sitting in the middle here, and whom I have worked with a few times in various other works. This is a video still from a 90s commercial by Spike Lee, the Urban Jungle Gym, where colors and patterns suggest the discourse of multiculturalism at the time. I was thinking about multiculturalism as a form of co-option where diversity was being recognized on a superficial level. There was also many adverts that Nike appropriate from, like, for example, feminist protest slogans. Individualism and competitiveness are also celebrated in these ads, which are ideal subjectivities for capitalism. The set also alludes to this liberal co-option of different cultures through aesthetics, as well as alluding to the history of revolutionary abstraction, such as Russian constructivism. And also, this is a camera angle that was often used within the Nike ads, like an overhead camera angle, and there was also a really iconic like pan down the body camera angle that we used. So I'm just going to show a clip of this.
My dad said I couldn't be a boxer.
Nobody owns us, man. When I say us, I mean nobody owns us. You understand? Nobody can own.
They form the golden chains of condition.
Your hydrogen fights with your oxygen.
But nobody owns us, man. When I say nobody, I mean nobody. Do you understand? Nobody can own.
My daddy hardly ever missed a day of work.
Free 5.0 plus.
The revolution will not begin with a laser show or a mascot or some sort of small trampoline.
So at this point, I felt my focus on language needed to expand. And this, I mean, at this point was after a few more works using this method. But I wanted to kind of expand my practice to make more connection to the real, both in terms of materiality and people. Instead of focusing so much on ideas, culture, and language as pure abstractions, I became interested in other theories such as media theory, which studies the ways in which technology and materials shape how we perceive and understand the world. Like, for example, a map or a castle. This work marked me becoming more interested in historical archives. So I was interested in archives, like the history of advertising is a historical archive, but I also started to focus on specific events or a building like a castle that I focus on for this project. So this work is called True Red Ruin, Elmina Castle, which combines historical research with a type of social practice. So Elmina was a military building to store and protect gold that was mined in Ghana, but later became the largest slave prison of its time, and it helped expand the transatlantic slave trade. When it was first built, it was actually an early flat pack. So basically, parts of the castle were prefabricated in Portugal and then brought on a ship in these pieces to Ghana. During my research, I was imagining what it would have been like to have that castle imposed on your community. One historical account I found stated that the castle was actually built on an ancient burial ground, and the local people of Elmina stormed the castle whilst it was being built to protect the burial ground. I am and I was during this time interested in how capitalism is not just about economic exploitation, but also about a loss of culture and other metaphysical systems through slavery. The design of the castle had towers in each corner, watching over the local inhabitants and acting a bit like a panopticon, criminalizing the population. So the towers were built essentially to watch over the sea, but it obviously would have watched over the people of Elmina as well. According to Foucault, this constant sense of being watched, but not actually seeing who is watching you, would have had a psychological effect on the inhabitants. This history is also racial. The book Dark Matters by Simone Brown, for example, talks about the connection between the history of surveillance, the technologies used to maintain the property of black bodies under slavery in relation to police violence now in our current context. And then Elmina Castle became a model for many other castles along the coast. Because the castle also acted as a storage device, storing gold and then slaves, there was, in the archive, there was early accounts of bookkeeping and stocktake. I was thinking about the castle as a form of media, like a cell phone or a hard drive, and how some of the logics of the castle, including surveillance and social control, for example, continue to be factors in certain populations and how where certain populations are housed and policed. True Red Ruin considers these connections of the past to the present. So we did this by reenacting some of the events that took place at Elmina Castle as if it was happening now. Me, my sister, and her friends perform parts of this history based on historical accounts of Elmina. And one example is that the locals of Elmina were forced to pay taxes to have the castle built in their village. So the castle in the video was a standee, and so that meant that it was easy to bring to, as a prop, it was an easy way to bring the castle to my sister's area where she lived. But it also was interesting to me because it's the most common technology of branding displays. And so I was thinking about the work conjuring the materiality of contemporary marketing and circulation, and making a connection to the fact that the castle itself was also in parts and prefabricated. We imagined the castle being built in the middle of my sister's housing estate in Houston, Texas, thinking about what it actually was, a prison and a warehouse. Through workshops, we thought about ways in which power is embodied and how the technology of a building or a phone can become a technology of surveillance and control. We thought about the panopticon effect of the cell phone resulting in self-surveillance and commodification. behind me in this image was a drawing based on a historical map of the castle. I took the castle out to leave the landscape representation, and we used this as a selfie backdrop, and some parts of the video itself was shot on a cell phone. And this is a drawing showing like the other basis of more backdrops that were drawn in the same way, and each one would have had the castle in it, but I took the castle out and just left the land or the village that was there before the castle was built. And this is an installation view that is at the Stedelijk Museum currently in Amsterdam. And so you can see the video ended up becoming a 2-channel video, and the standee castle and some of the landscape elements surround the TV. And then I'm going to show a clip of this.
Bad argument.
Some of the castle parts have arrived.
I just woke up this morning and I saw a lot of red bricks outside of my window. Archers, rafters, beams, arches, windows, and they're all in the middle of the houses.
Okay, so I'm here outside the castle. It got built, so that's great. This is from the castle.
Oh, thank you. I'll take a look at it. You have a wonderful day. Bye-bye.
Hi, my name is Adrian. I am working at the castle. I answer phones, answering questions and setting appointments for like plumbing and stuff. I like talking on the phone. It's just that I just don't like talking all day. Some people call with an attitude.
Well, since the castle here anyways, we might as well take the opportunity of the jobs they have available for us. Like inventory, being a loader. You can even be a manager of the warehouse. Even a security guard for the ones that's in the tower watching us. A little extra money to put in your pocket. Who don't need that?
I'm in it.
Yeah. I got my badge. It's time to start working now.
Okay, so another archive I previously entered was a shopping centre in the centre of Paris called BHV, Bazaar des Hôtels de Ville. Sorry for whoever's French out there. It was first built in 1870. It was the significant institution in Paris at the height of the empire. I gained access to their shopping catalogue archive, which was from 1980 when it was first built until the present. I was interested in this being a pre-Amazon, the online retailer. The archive is a history of how objects and consumer goods are presented to us through drawing, photography, and images, and how this has contributed to a French identity and a type of nationalism. For Lazaratu, signs and signifiers are essential to producing a capitalist subject. Late capitalism is interestingly about what he calls immaterial labor, or the work of desiring and consuming. I was interested in the archive being a history of signifiers that project certain subjectivities onto objects. BHV is located in the center of Paris, and only certain types of Parisians go there. I worked with some women who live in the suburbs of Paris, and some of them had never stepped foot into BHV. These women were mostly second-generation immigrants from France's old colonies, such as Guadeloupe, Algeria, and Martinique. In the workshops that spanned a couple of years of us working together, we examined and discussed the pages of the archive. This is the only woman of color we could find in the archive, despite the French colonial history, and she was there in order to show off the whites of the sheets. We discussed our personal experiences of being second or third generation from Africa and the colonies. The video takes these discussions and ideas that are developed in the workshops and creates a part documentary, part fictional video where the women journey through the pages of the archive, unfolding into the real streets of Paris. This is one example of an archive page from the 60s, and you can see like an army or an assemblage of white appliances. And through digital images, it becomes a scene in the journey that the women could inhabit. The piece discusses the complex relation between people and objects and people as objects.
Il faut trouver une issue. C'est compliqué de trouver qui on est lorsque toutes ces choses nous parasitent.
I am interested in combining fiction with reality when historical materials exclude certain voices and speak from the point of view of the oppressors. I see this as a way of colliding time, the present, with the past and speculating with potentials. This is a video still from Bazaar, where the women hold tools found in the archive on the metro in Paris.
This book.
Sorry, I have to keep going. In that final scene of the video, Emily dances crump next to a gigantic coffee machine. I was interested in Emily's performance as a type of resistance to normative identities. The dance also suggested a kind of reflection on machinery, gender, and labor. And this is an image of a series called I'm Hiding in Here. This one is I'm Hiding in Here 1921, and is a series of watercolors where drawings of the participants are hiding in the pages of the archive, and Ingrid is hiding behind that kitchen cabinet thing. I deleted the copy to focus on the objects and the post-colonial subjects hiding in between. And then this piece started out as a one-channel video, and then I showed it again and split it into a 4-channel installation. And this is one view where you could see standees that were made from the appliances that are in the video. And then this is another view of the piece with landscape elements and tents and things that were in the video itself. Okay, so moving on. When I was living in Detroit, I got obsessed with Ford, probably because you know that Ford was based there, and I gained access to an archive of Ford advertisements. This is an example of an advert I found from 1924. I was interested in the representation of landscape repeated through the archive. The car is often positioned in the front and using the technique of perspective with the human always at the center of the landscape. Early Ford car ads were painted depictions before photography and digital imagery became a thing. Painting has a closer relation to the imaginary, and I was thinking about the collective effect these depictions, like seeing these things over and over again, have on our imaginary and the ways in which we relate to the natural world. I started to think about these ads as an assembly line of the image, thinking about them constituting an industrialized production of the American imaginary. Walt Disney was obsessed with Ford and the Fordist methods of Taylorism, which probably everyone knows, but just quickly explain, where the car is split into separate discrete tasks along an assembly line. For me, there was a connection between Disney's representations of landscape and the car Ford ads. So I decided to make an animation using a digital version of a technique called the multiplane camera that Disney was famous for using. The multiplane camera comes out of a production that mimics the assembly line. It splits up the landscape into layers, into large planes of glass, and the camera moves through the layers to create a parallax view, an illusion of depth. Disney's Bambi movie uses this machine. And these are examples at the top of this advert being split into layers. There's more than these two layers, but you can see the principle of it.
With our original picture broken down in this manner, it is possible to control the relative speed with which each individual part of it moves to or away from the camera.
So that shows an example of the multiplane camera. In effect, the representation of landscape becomes an efficient assembly line which ignores the complex ecology and physical and social connections in nature. The production of images, the imaginary, has an effect on the real, and these depictions put humans at the center of land, and when split like this, it can justify extracting from it, as if the lands can be pulled apart and extracted for our use. So the animation that I made based on all of this research rolls through multiple different landscapes depicted in Ford car ads. So these landscapes range from 1924, which I think was the earliest ad that I found, until the present, so of our present. And so this is an example of an advert from the 80s, so it's like a very 80s looking image. The animation rolls through these landscapes for about 20 minutes, and this is an install from the Whitney Biennial last year? I don't know, not so long ago. Okay, so as that rolls past, I'm going to talk over the animation. So after spending some time in the Ford archives in Detroit and Dearborn, I found a section focused on Fordlandia. Fordlandia was a work camp that Henry Ford set up in the Brazilian Amazon to yield rubber for the production of tires. Workers came from all over the Amazon and would live, eat, school, and sleep at the camp. It was an extension of Ford's desire to create the ideal worker, and in this case, to civilize and save the poor indigenous people. There was many failures of Fordlandia, but one was that they burnt down an entire part of the forest to plant rubber trees close together, as if in an assembly line. Rubber trees do best in diverse forests, and when planted close together, they become vulnerable to tree blight and bugs, and therefore their plan didn't really work. And then one side note, I just wanted to note the Disney film theme continues. Walt Disney himself visited Fordlandia, but Henry Ford never ever went there. Okay. So the archive was full of bureaucratic documents like this one, which showed the rational organization of the rubber plantation. The archive was from the point of view of the managers. So, for example, this document shows a list of things that were damaged when the workers caused a riot, or it was essentially a protest, but described by the archive as a riot. But there were literally no accounts from the workers themselves. It was all this kind of like listing of the damage. So I thought about what it would have been like to be a worker then, and because that's an impossibility really, I wondered how I could think through the archive in the present. I thought about post-Fordism now and how the assembly line has exploded across the globe in various ways. Rubber was a large commodity back then, and now a big commodity or a big thing is data, is big business. I began researching another project in the Amazon, this time the internet retailer. So this company is called Amazon Mechanical Turk, which is a side company from Amazon, which started in 2005 and is an example of a web platform where data is extracted from humans on a massive scale. Amazon Mechanical Turk, shortened to AMT, is a crowdsourcing platform that allows for a gathering of mass data from humans. Requesters, which is the name of anyone who goes on the site and wants to post a job, which is called a human intelligence task, which is shortened to hits. So requesters post hits, and these human intelligence tasks go out to thousands of workers at the same time to gather large amounts of human data. This data often comes in the form of questionnaires, image identification, and other types of click work, and it is used for many different reasons, but one of the big things right now is it's to feed AI machine learning algorithms. There are many workers situated all over the world, but mainly in the US and India, with workers getting paid very little for each hit, and it's like a new kind of global assembly line. I decided to try and connect with some AMT workers to learn about their living and working conditions as a way to reflect on the Fordlandia case study. Through a series of workshops with the workers, we discussed what types of conditions the workers are in, whether the work is fulfilling, what kind of life does this work enable, what kind of future does this type of work suggest. There are many reasons why people do this work, for example, being recently laid off, or that you can't go to the office for some reasons, such as disabilities or care responsibilities. And in actual fact, this piece was made during COVID, so there was a bunch more people that joined AMT. The logic of the platform means you don't get to see the person behind the work. This is ideal for corporations as it prevents workers from organizing together, as well as the fact that the corporations don't have to pay for healthcare or any other benefits, and they don't have to deal with maybe the messiness of being in front of real humans. This is Mohammed Waji's bed. He works for AMT from his bed in India. And this is a quote from him. "I work at home during the daytime, I work in the living room, and during the evening and nights, I work laying on my bed. I just put my laptop beside me, and I sleep and I wake during nights just to check if there's any new work available. As of now, I don't mind sleeping on the same bed with the laptop beside me. For me, money is money and is very important rather than total comfort." In Fordlandia, clocks were smashed during a protest. A whistleblower who had dirt on Ford was accused of being a diamond thief to discredit him. Workers were expected to work during the hottest part of the day. Ford insisted the workers ate canned peaches imported from Michigan instead of the abundance of foods the rainforest had to offer. And the indigenous workers were forced to learn square dancing. Many irrational decisions were made by the managers as they sought to westernize the indigenous workforce. This Fordist dream of cultural assimilation contrasts with the work of Amazon Mechanical Turk. For example, having to use your wages at the company to buy board and food is comparable to how people, particularly in India, are often paid in Amazon vouchers instead of actual wages. This is AMT worker Amy. She shot the footage for the video that I'm going to show some clips on in a second herself, setting up the lighting and sound. Each worker received a camera kit with lighting, sound, and props. Each worker shot every scene from their homes where they work. So we had to do a lot of workshops to figure out how to navigate that, and everyone learned a lot about shooting film. The video is a reenactment of events that occurred in Fordlandia, all that I found in the archive, such as the workers' protest or riot, for example. There is a mix of this historical fiction with their own lives as AMT workers. Part of the project involved a studio shoot, which some people here know that during COVID I maybe lost my mind a little bit, and I painted loads and loads of artificial plants for this studio shoot. So each plant, which you can hardly see maybe in this image, is hand painted by me in my studio during COVID. And so essentially also the backdrop is it's actually a digital version of a painting, but I wanted the piece to kind of have this fictional Disney-like space to it that essentially was a sort of imaginary or digital space. And this is the install at the Tate Britain as part of the Art Now series. There was a large anamorphic projection on the back wall, which focused mainly on the studio shoot, but also there was other footage that went back and forth between the monitors in the front and the large anamorphic projection. Each monitor was dedicated in a way to one AMT worker, and the forest kind of acted a bit like the headquarters of Amazon or the Amazon forest. Oops. That's another install image. And then within the installation, there was data servers that were cast in rubber with these plants growing out of them, which was also a reference to at the real Fordlandia that collapsed. There was a lot of the forest that was growing over the camp, and so I was interested in thinking about that in terms of the future of technology.
So I've been working in the Amazon for going on about 1.5 years. I started primarily because I lost my job. I was laid off, and I needed a way to support my family, but I had to stay home. I had to stay home with my kids.
I've been working on the Amazon for 6 years now, and it's been working out pretty well for me, actually. I was searching and searching, trying to find work, trying to find a job in the Amazon, and I found this job, and it's actually pretty cool because I get to choose my own hours, I get to choose my own tasks. So like, if there's ever something I don't want to do, I just don't do it.
It can be thankless, can be rewarding.
By bringing back square dancing as well as other primarily Anglo-Saxon dances, we believe we may counteract the unwholesome influence of jazz on America. People will leave the dance halls and cabarets in droves to swing their partners round and round at liquor-free square dance clubs. Jazz is the cause of America's moral decay. The road to repair is as simple as replacing it with fiddles and square dances.
This dance?
All join hands, circle left around the hall to that little old cabin in the lane. You're all going wrong, go back the other way to that little old cabin in the lane. Place is all balanced on and everybody swing to that little old cabin in the lane. To the left hand on your corner and your partner by the right, and your grand right and left half all around. First by your right hand and the next one by your left, to that little old cabin in the lane. When you meet your partner, you make your homeward flight to that little old cabin in the lane. Little old cabin in the lane. Well, folks, let's speed it up.
Move on. So this project was also part of Performa in 2021, and this version had actors who played AI training to be human from the AMT workers. The performance was also live streamed, so if you were in the space, you'd see these cameras moving direction that I was operating in the booth, which was kind of complicated because I'd never done that before. But anyway, it had this like relationship between the footage on the monitors, which was of the AMT workers, and then these actors who were kind of telling a similar but different story to the installation. So I have also been working on a series of large watercolors that are about 4 by 7 feet that brings these two worlds of Amazon Mechanical Turk and Fordlandia together. They're a collage of all of the Ford ads that I have been obsessed with without the cars in them, but each work has the place of an AMT worker situated in them. These works are really about the production of the imaginary and the American dream in contrast to the reality of working from your bed or a small desk in your living room. This one includes an archival photo from Fordlandia, which is the burning of the rainforest to clear the land for the rubber trees. And this is another example. The dragon is actually from a Ford ad from the 2000s, so it's a digital render of the dragon, and everything that, if it's a photograph or a watercolor, so the early ads are watercolor, they're all rendered in the end in the painting in watercolor. And then this is Amy's bed with her laptop on there. And this was a work that was made, I think, for last year at 47 Canal in New York, and it's a 5-panel landscape. So it's similar principle to the ones I just showed you, but this time it's 35 meters long. So I kind of wanted it to be like this long, like assembly line type landscape. It's not a very good image, you can't really see it that well, but it basically goes from night to day through, and so you could like walk past it a bit. It kind of felt a bit like an animation or something, as if you walking through it kind of animated the painting. And this is one of the panels on their own. And then this is a series of works that I made for this show also, that I was looking at medieval paintings, and I was interested in the way in which this type of work, both Amazon Mechanical Turk and actually Amazon themselves, is a type of framing of people because of the type of life that it enables or doesn't enable. And so these are portraits of the AMT workers, which sort of influence for like portraits of nobles. And there's a Amazon warehouse framing device around Greg, who is sitting on his bed doing AMT work from his phone. And the back is a landscape from a Ford ad. And this is the similar principle too. This is Elizabeth doing AMT work on her porch, and then the framing device in the painting is again from Amazon warehouses, and the frame itself has icons and symbols from the AMT site online. And then this is a piece called Walled City and Land, which again was influenced by medieval paintings, and I was thinking about the warehouse as a castle, basically, in this piece. Okay, so the last work, and I promise it won't take too long to talk about, is a piece that I literally just finished a few weeks ago. And this is based on this Thai food tea collectible card. So Thai food tea is tea that is very popular in the UK. I think it's a British brand. And this collectible card is from 1937, and it's one of many different cards that celebrates the British Empire. And in this case, it's depicting the Taranaki region in New Zealand. The idyllic looking green pasture of cows grazing for milk, shown here, does not show the destruction of the forest that once was there before. And the pollution that comes from just generally cows create a lot of methane, but also there's a lot of pollution that comes from the pesticides or the essentially the stuff that they need to feed the green desert, the grass, in order for it to grow, because it's not indigenous to this area, and that stuff goes into the rivers and water sources. So it's kind of a really destructive, idyllic image. to make this work titled White, I consulted the members of the Narahahi Iwi, I'm sorry, I can't pronounce that so well, who are one of the 8 Iwi or Maori tribes from this Taranaki region. Members were academics, environmentalists, and elders, for example. I produced an animation that speculates on what the forest was like before such destruction, with drawings of indigenous trees and plants, and a white liquid that looks a bit like a contagion, invades the space and takes away the color and clears the forest. So the animation rolls through what you just saw and then lands on, like the forest is cleared, and it lands on the collectible card, so you can see that it looks like the card. And then essentially it just rolls through and then rolls back to the forest. So it's a kind of loop of taking away and bringing back the forest. So that's it. We can just leave that rolling, but that's the end of the lecture. Am I meant to say, do you have any questions? Do you have any questions? I worked with a sound designer, and we were trying to do something subtle, but like something that like brought alive the forest when it was the forest, but then also felt like kind of magical in a way, like to enchant the forest. And then when the milk came on, or the white blobby liquid, it was like about like creating sounds of that being globby and visceral or something like that. It was a pretty simple sound. I mean, I don't think it was simple to do, but yeah.
That was great, Danielle.
Thank you.
So with the M-Torque workers, right? I think when we hire performers, we always encounter this relationship with you also are doing a economic exchange with them, right?
Oh, sure.
Do they first thought that it was a task, your project too, or like how you, when you're working for hire kind of participants, that they are doing the thing, right? So like, how do you get over that hump of like not being another task that they don't want to do as exchange of money?
Yeah. Well, first of all, instead of using the logic of the site to to work with the workers, because if I used this AMT, that site, to connect with the workers, you could only connect that one time. It's not possible to regain, and you actually can't really connect. It's more like you ask for the task and then you get back what you've asked for, and you can't communicate. I'm good friends with someone called Lily Iriani, and she, with someone else, started up this site called Turkopticon, which is a kind of activist site that enables, well, it's run now by Amazon Mechanical Turk workers themselves, and it's like a rating site so that people can rate requesters so that they know not to work with people who are not great. Anyway, cut a long story short, I put an ad for the project on to that platform so that then we could connect in a direct way, so that I could explain exactly what the project was about, and if they're interested in it. If not, they're not. So it kind of took it out of the logic of the Amazon Mechanical Turk. Yeah. Did that answer your question?
Yeah, no.
Not really.
No, it's I mean, it is. I mean, no, it's just going to chat. I mean, it was basically it's like going to one of those Reddit sites, so like just kind of get it out of the system. You know, it's like I was just curious to know how one entered a system without being really part of the system. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, I did join one of those Reddit sites, and I also did try to become a worker myself to see how it was, but this way was more like, if you are, like, it was more truthful, like I could just, totally explain what the project was, that it was art, and if you're interested to become a part of it, like, I mean, it was still paid work, so, but I think it wasn't as alienated, because at every point, everything was explained and discussed, it wasn't obscuring the, I don't know. You'd have to ask them to see if I was horrible or was a bad person to work with.
They sent this question.
Thank you, Danielle. I wanted to ask a question. It's not so related to your process, but I'm curious about the legacy of Fordlandia. What happened to it?
Yeah, it's the jungle. The forest has grown over it. It's like a ruin now. I mean, people live there and still live there. Like, they lived there around like the place that it was situated, and they still do. And apparently, I mean, I haven't been, but I spoke to someone called Steffi Sherman, who's a kind of, like, she wrote her dissertation on Fordlandia, and she went, and she was telling me that there's a lot of really interesting stories about, like, what happened, and that perhaps Fordlandia wasn't about rubber, that actually there was gold there, and that the whole thing was like a cover-up of the fact that people were actually extracting gold and putting it on the ships and taking that out of the place. So I don't know, that seemed really interesting to me. That yes, but now I don't think that that's even happening, because apparently there's also maybe a cave there, or something like that has gold that was sealed and no one can access it. So I don't know. It's Is that okay?
something better come out, I will just. So you have Forlandia, right? There is a company, a city, right? And but also Ford. I mean, it's kind of the bad side, or the bad side of the labor unions too. And the workers from the Ford Foundation really were integral part of the middle class in America, right? So, and you have also this new kind of like attitude with Amazon to kind of divide and conquer, right? Non-centralize the work so you can have exploit labor as much as you can. So I wonder, well, like, what is your relationship with this kind of like labor organizing, and in this case, like, I mean, you've been making a lot of work about kind of this like disjuncture that happened with labor and capitalism, but I wonder what is, after all this works, I mean, how much you are thinking about the future of labor in relationship to the work.
Yeah, I don't know. I feel like it's it is like I'm not part of a union, but I think it would be cool for us to form one. I mean, could we form an art union? Would that? I don't know. Like, I mean, huh? United Artists? I mean, yeah. Like, I'm not. Yeah, I don't know. I'm not part of that, but. Is that something that exists already? Or you just... Oh, okay. Yeah, so I mean... Yeah, I think a lot about it, like, in terms of, like, well... Like, because, for example, I'm making a work right now in my hometown, and I'm actually... Like, it's a work that is personal, but also... thinking about the type of work that actually I did do myself when I lived there, but also what kind of work people are doing there. It's not just about labor, but that's one aspect of it. And I have been talking to Amazon workers because the warehouse there is closed. It's actually closed now, but it was closing during the time that I was there doing research. And it's interesting because, I mean, I don't know if it's interesting, but it's one of those things like that when I lived there, I worked in a similar job, but it was for the Royal Mail. Like, that was one of the jobs that I did as a young person there. And I did shift work, like night work, to sort the post and different stuff like that. And I don't know, it was like one of those things that, like, I've been thinking about in regards to, like, is the solution that those jobs don't exist? I don't know. Like, that's what these corporations want, because Amazon is trying to replace human labor with AI and bots and things. Like, what? But I don't know if... It's more about if this work could not be so... extractive and not be so dismissive of the humanity of people, or the fact that we aren't machines, right? That the labor is done by humans, and that if we can care more for that fact and care for the majority of people, because actually there's more people doing that kind of work than any other type of work. So I don't know if that answers your question, but I'm thinking of it I suppose it's like I'm not part of an activist or a labor movement myself, but I am thinking about it in terms of a speculative, like future way, like, because this question is going to get worse as well as these corporations are moving more and more away from human labor. And actually that's interesting, because that's one of the things that the Amazon Mechanical Turk workers were saying, is that their labor that they're doing is contributing to things that will mean that humans aren't necessarily needed in the future, because this is what the AMT work is for AI, training machines. And so they're conscious of the fact that their work is for such things, as one of the things that comes up in the video.
Hi, Danielle. Thank you for this beautiful talk. I realized as you're speaking about labor that you showed all these installations in kind of their finished state, if that makes sense. I understand that there's a kind of symbolic value and storytelling, and all of these references were kind of disclosed to us today. But I feel like I still don't know whether you have a studio or how your own labor is represented, like in terms of, paint or paper or data or chords or like memory. How do you store certain kinds of things that you're producing? So like your body at work, let's say, in terms of the process itself.
Like a lot of the work is handmade, which that's one way that like for example, I used to work in advertising, like before I studied fine art in London, and then I worked as an art director for a few years in advertising before studying for my MFA at Cal Arts. And so during that time, I made things like window displays, which is maybe similar to the aesthetics of the standees. Like we actually designed standees and things for products. And like in some ways, I think you see the labor that goes into that work more, the work that I'm making more, because it isn't a massive corporation developing this work for a brand. It's like often hand drawn, for example. So the castle that has the standee, that originally was a drawing that was scanned and then turned into the standees. Or like, for example, the banners that I showed for the True Red Ruin piece, those were drawn. Like I drew these maps and took the castle out, and that was all drawn and then scanned and turned into this thing that looks more like a product. But I mean, they all in some ways are, but this ways in which they start out being rendered by hand, or something that is circulated as a digital image gets rendered by hand. So I mean, it's not that I'm obsessive with the hand, it's just that there's something about translating something that is circulating globally through the ways in which the body or myself can turn it into something else, if that makes sense.
Thank you.
Hi, Danielle.
Oh, hey.
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for your talk. As a historian, art historian, media historian, I was so fascinated wondering about your experience with the archival process. I have myself so many different experiences with archives in terms of level of access or obstructionist archivists, or it's also sometimes really difficult to uncover things in there, right?
Yeah.
Sometimes it's just laid bare, and it's just the luck of the draw sometimes as well. I was just curious about your process, if you wanted to talk about that a little bit. Thanks.
Well, so my process is being like maybe obsessive, or like just being there for a long, long time, and as much time as I can to just look through everything. So I don't know if that's a good process, but for example, recently I went to an archive about my hometown because of this new work that I'm doing, and this archive, I only had the day, and I just looked at it all and took photos of everything, and I didn't really have time to process what I was looking at, and I'm doing that now. But if I have more time, then I'll let myself look at things and then let that lead me to something else. But it's almost a bit like gathering as well, and then spending time with that stuff, and then seeing what what's interesting about it. That is often how I do it, because like for Fordlandia, that archive, that was so fascinating, and that was a kind of complicated archive because of, like I said, everything was very bureaucratic, and some of it might have looked incredibly boring, like that page that I showed of all of the things that were damaged. Like, I had to look at that carefully to be able to know that that was actually interesting. So that time I spent more time there looking really carefully at stuff and just letting myself drift and not knowing what I'm going to do with any of it. And if it's funny because we're visual, if it's visual, that definitely stands out to me. I'm definitely one of those people, like looking through and there's like boring. Oh, there's something visual. That often does stand out to me. But to pay attention to things that might not seem interesting straight away. There's no one here, so shall I just say thank you?